Hello everyone, welcome back to r/nosleep. This time around I have found some stories about finding things that you're probably not supposed to see or that you regret seeing. So I'm not good with intros, so let's just get right into it with the first story. My wife forgot to delete her browser history. I can't believe what I found. 4:34 p.m. How to stop husband from cheating. I had only clicked on the history tab to delete the last thing I searched for when I noticed the entry. Hurriedly, I finished zipping up my fly and stared at it in bewilderment. Amy and I had been almost too careful. We had never so much as looked at one another in my wife's presence, let alone done anything that could have raised suspicion. There was no way she could have known what was going on, even if she looked through my phone. With a heavy heart, I forced myself to delete any incriminating photos Amy sent me after I was done with them. We had a strict call-only policy. Amy was our latest hire, and aside from being great at her job, she excelled in garnering male attention. Everyone loved her. She was strikingly beautiful and uninhibited to the point where her energy felt almost carnal. Sending all morals and restraints out the window, I tried to ignore her at first, even finding excuses to go home early, but eventually her charming giggle got the better of me, too. 4:37 p.m. How much does divorce cost? Droplets of sweat sprang out of my forehead. What? Was my wife planning to divorce me? But why? There was no way she knew about Amy and me. Was there someone else? Was she planning to accuse me of infidelity? All while going at it with some lover boy she'd met at her yoga class? 4:39 p.m. Why do humans feel emotions? I pursed my lips. If by some miracle my wife did know about the affair, I couldn't imagine the way she must have been feeling. I woke up late this morning and found a note on the kitchen table saying that she didn't want to wake me and that she was out doing her Saturday errands. Almost felt compelled to call her in. Oh, I flinched as a large drop of blood landed on the keyboard. What the hell? My first instinct was to look up at the ceiling. Nothing. A strong metallic smell made me come to my senses. I brushed my hand against my face. A bright red smudge sat on my palm. I stared at it, alarmed. I'd never gotten nosebleeds before, aside from the time I got hit in the face with a football in high school. My head raised. I scrambled to my feet and made a dash for the bathroom, my hands cupping my throbbing nose. Once I had managed to stop the bleeding and clean myself up, I returned the computer. 4:44 p.m. Which part of the brain is responsible for love? This was an oddly specific search. I couldn't recall my wife ever being interested in science or biology. I checked the account logged into the browser just in case. Perhaps this was someone else's history altogether. Maybe we'd been hacked. No, seemed like everything was in order. My wife's smiling face stared back at me from the login window. What was she doing searching for brain parts anyway? 4:49 p.m. What is excerebration? What was excerebration? Some kind of fancy divorce? I'd never heard of the term in my life. I didn't even hesitate before clicking it, eager to find out what my wife was planning for us. I wish I hadn't. As the results came up on the monitor, my stomach lurched and my gag reflex kicked in. The images were graphic enough for my hand to automatically gravitate towards the return button, but a short paragraph in bold caught my eye. An ancient procedure involving chiseling through the bone of the nose in order to scoop out the brain matter. Gross. My heart hammering in my chest, I clicked the back button and scanned the rest of the entries. 501. Can a person live without the hypothalamus? 505. Location of the hypothalamus. 5:11 p.m. How much temazepam is safe? My skin crawled as I read, but I couldn't look away. I was so immersed that I didn't even hear the front door bang. Honey, I'm home. I stared at the wall, too shocked to reply. What was I meant to say? How was I supposed to ask her about all this? Hello? She called again, her heels clacking towards me. Hey, I choked. throwing the box of tissues into the drawer. How was... Oh, good. She smiled as she appeared in the doorway. How are you? You had quite a lot to drink last night. I stammered. I did? She studied me, as though she wasn't sure whether I was joking or not. What's all this? I asked, gesturing to the computer screen. She joined me at the desk, frowning at the clammy wood surface. What? I pointed at the browsing history, my index fingers shaking visibly in the air. Oh, she flushed, two pink spots appearing on her cheeks. Well, you did say we could try it, so I had to do a little research, you know? What? I said we could try what? Oh, she waved her hand dismissively. The X is something. You probably know better. My blood ran cold. The X of vibration. Karen, what did you do? Of course she's a Karen. Before she could say anything, a splash of blood landed on the carpet. Then another one, and another. Karen watched me, her skin growing pale. What? Suddenly, a small fleshy lump escaped my nostril and rolled down the front of my shirt. We both stared at it in shocked silence. Then my wife screamed, turning on her heel to flee the room, but I caught up to her, pinning her against the wall. Tell me what the fuck you did! She tried to fight me, writhing under my grip, but I held on tight. Blood was streaming into my mouth and down my chin, staining both of our clothes. How can you not remember? She screeched, trying to elbow me in the ribs. Don't you remember what you did? I stared at her panic-stricken face, trying my best to recall any memories from the previous night. No, what did I do? You came home after work and told me you were leaving me for Amy. She sobbed. You said you didn't want to love her, but you did. I stood there quietly, mulling it over, as more pulp splashed onto my stomach. This is gross. Ew, we need to call you an ambulance, Karen shrieked, trying to pull away. What the fuck is that? Then what happened? I demanded, my heart practically leaping out of my chest. Tell me what you did. What the fuck, John? She screamed. We got drunk, okay? We got really wasted. And then you said you knew of a way to fix this, to fix us. You said there's something called hypothalamus in your brain, and if we removed it, it would stop you from loving Amy. He was drunk. What the fuck? I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. What the hell was she saying? Had she actually attempted to remove a part of my brain and... Wait, I whispered. Who's Amy? Her expression made me feel foolish for not remembering. I knew that name, Amy. It sounded so familiar, and yet I couldn't for the life of me put my finger on it. Is he losing parts of his brain and it's making him forget? Ugh. What the fuck do you mean? She sounded bewildered. Amy, the girl you were cheating on me with for 6 months? I mouthed, releasing my wife and crumpling to the floor. I don't remember. Karen stared at me, her white brows resembling a massacre, her mouth pressed into a thin line. What's happening to me? I whispered. She was silent for a moment, but I could see her eyes brimming with tears. Honey, what if I accidentally hit your hippocampus instead? Why did you do it? Why did you not go to the hospital? What? That told me nothing. For fuck's sake, Karen, I'm not a fucking encyclopedia. Enlighten me. What the hell is a hippocampus? Nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. Honey, she said, you're a doctor. It's the memory part of your brain. It's fucked up. Gross. Ugh. Like, for a second I thought the title was like, I won't be able to remember I won't be able to forget what I found or something. But no. Man, that's fucked up. What do the comments say? DIY lobotomy plus hard reset and memory wipe. It's still kind of standing. I'm impressed. True. No, they could have just pressed the red button on the side of his head with the long stick to reboot the system. Okay. I don't know why they decided to get drunk and then decided to do a surgery, but okay then. Anyways, moving on. Now this one I saw and I was like, I am not sure I'm gonna like this, but it's one of the highest posts of the last year and I thought it would be interesting, so. My video doorbell sends a motion detected alert every night at 2:53. I found a forum full of users experiencing this exact same issue. Now something seriously strange is going on. This reminds me of the Whistler from last year. It's like every night at like 3 a.m. or whatever, there's a Whistler that goes by and you're not supposed to look at him. This is what this title reminds me of. And it scared the crap out of me. I had like a nightmare that night or something. I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, the following post from the Roost Video Doorbell Help Forum. After my phone started spamming motion detected alerts, I did a quick Google search, stumbled across this thread, and created an account. In case it isn't obvious, my username is Lightning Nations. Dates are in UK format. Motion alert triggers every night at 2:53. Dan King 22. Posted October 27th, 2022 at 3:06 a.m. Trying this again because the admins are a bunch of whiny snowflakes who cry whenever someone uses a naughty word. Video Doorbell sends motion alert to my phone every night at 2:53. Tech support keeps saying it's picking up banging gate or squirrel, but that's rubbish. All the camera sees is patio floor and furniture. Can I get some assistance, please? Motion alert triggers every night at 2:53. Too many top hats. That's a great name. 10/27/2022, 1:08 p.m. I'm in the exact same boat, 2:53 each night like clockwork. There's weird pixelation and distortion in the footage, but it works like a charm the rest of the time. Monitoring this thread to tech support, not good enough. Same thing, except from Paleo 10. What would this be? 3:45 p.m. Mine's doing the same thing. Bloody phone goes off every night and I get an alert with garbled footage. The support line aren't much help. I've muted notifications for now, but it's a bit pointless having the camera if it won't warn me and the misses whenever someone's breaking in. A solution would be very much appreciated. Cheers. Okay, back to Dan King. Glad to see it isn't only me. I've been on the phone to the tech guys for days. Useless. And that was at 6:29 p.m. Okay, this is 2 days later. From a deleted user. Hi Dan, there are instructions for fixing this exact issue in the user guide, page 53. I've attached a PDF version here. Author's note, I've not included the link. Follow the troubleshooting steps and you'll be good as new. Back to Dan King. About 3.5 hours later. That is not a guide for a video doorbell. Those are instructions for installing a Samsung smart fridge. Did you upload the wrong file? How is that supposed to help anybody? This is a support forum for a Roost video doorbell. Idiot. Dan, just ignore that poster. He's a troll. I'm pretty sure that's his 6th account. Back to Dan. Except this is about an hour and a half later. Doesn't this freaking idiot not have anything better to do? Maybe he should get a job with Roost Tech support. It can't be hard. Good news for once, technical morons sending me a replacement. I just had shout at them for 3 hours. Useless, I swear. Wow. The replacement sends the same alerts. No motion in the garden, no intruders, no animals. I checked the video feed and there's nothing. Just a fuzzy shape. I rated these idiots 1 star on Amazon. Okay, back to Lighting Nations. This is like OP. Okay, this is... 2 days later? Hi everyone. Afraid I'm in the exact same boat, triggering at 2:53. Video feed comes out garbled, but is fine / works perfectly the rest of the day. The tech guy said it might be a low tree branch blowing in the wind, but I'd expect to be receiving random alerts spaced out across several hours, not once per day at the exact same time. I spent a fair chunk of change on this thing, and now Roost won't issue a refund, only replacements. Okay, brass. Deleted user. Okay, this is at 11:16 on the same day as this post. Sorry, it's my fault, Dan. I was in the garden piping your mom down wearing camel gear, which is why you couldn't see us. Okay, that's just weird. Okay, this is the next day at 8:04. Okay, so I'm not so sure the doorbell is actually the problem. I got held up at work last night, Joys are working in IT and was heating dinner at 2:53 when the microwave fritzed. The digital clock blinked on and off for a full minute. Meanwhile, my Echo device stopped mid-song and I got another motion alert. 1 minute later, everything went back to normal. We'll maybe get an electrician around to have a look. Also, the footage distortion keeps getting worse. Now in the alerts, it kind of looks like there's static, except it's warping around the garden. Nearly gave the wife a heart attack. That's interesting about the electrics. Keep us posted. This is about 3 hours later. The next day, 3:09, from Too Many Top Hats. My TV fritzed just now. Same problem as Paleo 10. Blinked on and off for a full minute right as the motion alert came through. Do you think maybe these things are draining power when they do overnight software updates or something? I'm not very technical. Might not make sense. Just a thought. I'm gonna check for grid faults with the council. Such is life in the south of England. Empty office blocks, rising hunger, and now potential rolling blackouts. Lovely. Okay, lighting... Nations, what was this? 8 hours later-ish? Tell me about it. I'm in Redacted. The stories you hear are heartbreaking. Paleo 10. About 5 hours later. Seriously? This is spooky. I'm in Redacted as well. I'm tempted to say there's a faulty batch of doorbells sitting in the Amazon warehouse somewhere that are gonna start blowing fuses. A replacement is on the way out to me, by the way. Arranged it before noticing the problems with the microwave. Had the electrician round and he saw no problems. I'd have smashed this thing already, but the missus saw how much I spent on it, so... Too Many Top Hats. Holy shit, this is Too Many Top Hats reporting to you live from Redacted. And the 12 points from England go to... Nah, but seriously, Rouge ships internationally. Weird, we're all in the same city. Councils say everything is fine, by the way. New person, Pixie Chick 01. About half an hour later, maybe 20 minutes. Hi, experiencing same issue, also in Redacted. Many Top Hats. This is 2 days later. Quick update, the guy who lives 3 doors down from me also has a Roost doorbell, different model, and he has the exact same problem. Motion alerts and muddled footage at 2:53. Works like a charm at all other times. Also, we're both now getting garbled audio like feedback whine from an amplifier in the recordings. The fun never ends. Back to Dan King. I'm in Redacted. Sick of this rubbish. Can't say what I really think because of stupid admin idiots now getting somebody outside alerts they sent me I hate the way that people write things. It's hard to read. Let me try this again. I'm in Redacted, sick of this rubbish. Can't say what I really think because of stupid admin idiots. Now getting somebody outside alerts they sent me a third device, now installed. If this one goes off again tonight, I'm gonna go outside and rip it out of the door frame and send them the repair bill. Sick of this. Okay, this is a couple hours later. No, this is at 2:53. The device is now working as intended. Go outside at 2:53. Check the camera. Paleo 10. What do you mean, check the camera? I've got my replacement installed, and this one bugs out worse than before. Now the bell rings for 1 minute non-stop, and I get constant, there's somebody at the door alerts. Hearing the stupid jingle in my dreams now. I won't even show the wife the footage, because it's like a figure made of pixels keeps ringing the bell. Also hearing the high-pitched screech when I play back footage. I'm seriously about to go all office space on this thing. Too Many Top Hats. Yeah, I'm confused, Dan. Could you elaborate? Preferably with less capital letters and more punctuation than usual. Uh-oh, Paleo 10, 2:53. Dan was right. Go outside at 2:53. Check the cameras. What do you mean, check the camera? Check what specifically? Yeah, +1. Please elaborate. I got the same problem as Paleo, now lighting. Full minute of somebody at the door alerts and constant ding dong with multiple distortions about the garden. When I played back the recordings, audio from outside is all screechy. Also, the app is useless. Tried disabling alerts on the phone, but they still came through. Already couldn't sleep because the wind keeps banging the gate. This is the last thing I need. Fed up, to be honest. I'll be hearing that stupid two-note chime in hell the way things are going. One more night of this and I'm grabbing the sledgehammer. Let's see if it detects that motion. Same from Too Many Top Hats, 253. The others were right. Go outside at 253, check the camera. What? It's freezing this time of year. I'm not getting out of bed in the middle of the night to check the camera. I've decided to get a Ring device instead and cut my losses. It's already been ordered. Cheers. Later that night, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. Like always, motion detected alerts started coming through at 2:53. I pulled up the grainy feed from outside, and in it, there were vague suggestions of figures scattered about the garden. By the fence post, under the tree, peeking through downstairs windows. I don't like that. Meanwhile, the soft two-note chime rang out. Ding dong, ding dong. It happened again and again, gathering speed, morphing into a hysterical scream. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. I got up, peeled back the curtain just a few inches. All of a sudden, there came a pounding from downstairs, a furious... Sorry, I just thought that would be better than just saying thump, thump, thump. So powerful, the windows and doors almost burst from their housings. The house became alive with movement. It felt like being trapped inside a tornado, everything around me rattling and quivering. Storm shutters scratching against walls, the letterbox rapping away. It's like, we're in Walmart now, there's a tornado outside. I sprinted into the bathroom and barricaded myself inside and called the police, the phone buzzing with a chorus of non-stop alerts. There's someone at the door, there's someone at the door, there's someone at... And then, out of nowhere, the house lowered its voice and went back to sleep. Checked my phone, 2:54. Now trembling, I brought up the feed from outside. There was nothing except a peaceful garden in the quiet section of street that lay beyond it. Now trembling, I brought up the feed from outside. Wait, no, I just read that, sorry. I looked down and I was like, oh, okay. Two officers turned up, checked the footage, and dismissed the encounter as a mixture of a technical glitch and overactive imagination and some nasty weather. But when I next clicked onto the forum, there were 4 new posts. It's 2:53, time to come outside. And it's from everyone. Oh, there's a comment. Welcome, I hope you enjoy your stay. Okay, this is just a subreddit. Okay, whatever. Interesting. Should have installed a Samsung fridge, man. Stupid consumer, now he's consumed. Yeah, exactly. That feels like a... What is the creatures called from like the Mandela catalog or whatever? Like alternates or something? That's what this feels like. And this was what it sounds like. I'm not entirely sure, but that's actually really creepy. I don't know if I'm gonna be awake at 2:53 tonight. Like, I think I was awake, the last time I read these stories. At around that time, I was just on my phone, and I was like looking outside my window. It's like dark out. It's just really creepy. Weird. I wonder, I do wonder if this was like an actual actual event that happened, or like if this is just like a story, because it's like No Sleep is like real stories, but it's like I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a cult or something. I don't know. Anyways, moving on. I'm a park ranger, and I found a town that doesn't exist. Okay, before I read this story, there's a bunch of stories that I might read next from, like, a park ranger. I might have to go back and, like, look at the other ones, but I'm not entirely sure. Not a park ranger, I think it's a military dude, but I could be wrong. I'll try to find him for next time, but if I can't, then I'll just try to find some type of theme. But anyways... I'm a park ranger, and I found a town that doesn't exist. I must be going crazy, and I can see a town that doesn't exist. My name is Samuel Baker. I'm a Yellowstone National Park Ranger, and I need some advice. I've spent my entire career fighting wildfires for the National Park Service, and after 2 decades in the field, I thought I've seen everything. Then about 4 hours ago, an entire town just appeared in the middle of Yellowstone National Park. The other ranger and I are the only ones who've been in it. We're not alone, however, as you might expect from something appearing out of nowhere inside of one of America's most famous parks. The town is home to many people, some of whom have been there for years. They all seem perfectly normal, but they aren't aware that they live inside a national park. My partner, Thomas, was the first to notice the town. He'd driven into the valley a few hours before dawn one morning and saw a brand new sign on the road. "Welcome to Hungry Horse," it read. When he drove past the next bend in the road, he saw the motel. That's when he turned around to come and get me. The two of us had driven up the valley together in our trusty old Chevy Blazer and taken the long way around because we hadn't wanted to pass through the town until we were sure what it was. We parked at the base of the mountain and hiked up. We walked across the railroad tracks and past a small gas station with a lone oil drum full of diesel fuel and another filled with water. The street was lined with old cars, some of which looked like they'd been there for a while, others which had probably just arrived that morning. Hungry Horse wasn't a ghost town or even abandoned, it was thriving. Thomas and I entered the town cautiously, because despite appearances, this place could be dangerous. While we didn't run into any trouble, we didn't notice that everyone seemed indifferent to the fact that they just appeared out of nowhere. Most of them ignored us completely, although a few gave us strange looks. "Some of these people look familiar," I said, looking over at Thomas. He nodded. "I know what you mean, Sam. I recognize a couple people in the diner, too. It's weird." "It's weird?" Those words echoed in my head as I watched a man carrying a bucket walk down the sidewalk. "It's weird," I repeated silently to myself. My eyes followed his movements. The man carried himself with confidence and purpose, but he never looked up at where he was walking. Instead, he stared straight ahead and continued forward without looking back once. He disappeared around the corner of a building, and I noticed another person staring directly at me. He was tall and thin, wearing a black hiking jacket. His face was pale, and he was bald. He was standing in the doorway of a small coffee shop. He reminded me of the missing hiker we had searched for last week. That's when I realized why I recognized some of the people here. They are all people who have vanished from national parks. That's how we found out that almost every person in Hungry Horse had been reported missing from national parks. We spoke to everyone we could find. Some refused to talk, others were friendly enough, but none of them knew anything about why they were there. As far as they were concerned, they lived in Hungry Horse, Montana. They weren't sure exactly when they arrived there. A lot of them couldn't remember much before arriving in Hungry Horse. They also told us they'd been here for years. Many of them had been born and raised in the town and believed it was the real deal. They all knew the townsfolk by name and went to school with them. One woman, an older lady named Irene, told us she had no idea she'd been reported missing. She worked at the local hardware store and had been living in Hungry Horse for more than 45 years. "What about your husband?" I asked. "Do you have children? Grandchildren?" She shook her head. "No, I've never married." "How do you feel about being here? Do you miss anywhere else? Your family, maybe?" Again, she shook her head. "Not really. This is my home." As far as she knew, this was the only home she'd ever known. I tried to ask if she missed her family, but she just smiled and told me that her family was right here in Hungry Horse, Montana. We thanked her and left the hardware store. Hopping back into our park ranger truck, we drove deeper into the town. "I really don't like this, Sammy," Thomas said. "I've had a feeling of being watched ever since we entered town." I looked over at him. He was staring at a man standing by a large semi-trailer outside the diner. The man was holding a jug of milk. I couldn't help but think of the hiker we found dead last week. "Sam, are you listening to me?" I snapped back to reality and looked at my partner. Thomas had started quivering in fear. "Sorry, what did you say?" "I said I think we should leave. I don't want to be here anymore." I looked around the town. There were so many people here, so many people who shouldn't be here. All of them were perfectly normal. Some of them even knew each other. How could there be so many people in a town that didn't exist? "I agree. Let's go." We drove away from the town back to the ranger cabin. Thomas was still shaking. I'm gonna make a prediction. They're gonna go back to the town, either with more people or just to return to see if it's still there, and it's gonna be gone. That's my prediction. "I'm going to call this in," he said. "This whole thing is bullshit, and we better document it anyway. I mean, how can an entire town full of missing people disappear in the middle of Yellowstone?" I nodded. "Okay, I'll be in the cabin. I think I need some time to process all this shit." I sat down on the couch and closed my eyes. It all felt unreal. I kept thinking about the hiker we'd found in the woods last week. He died while out on a hike in the wilderness. He'd been alone and confused, but I just saw him alive and well in a town that doesn't exist. I opened my eyes and looked around. I took in a deep breath and let it out. It smelled like wood smoke and pine. I stood up and started pacing the room. What am I supposed to make of all of this? I asked myself, is this some kind of sick joke? Did the government put a town in Yellowstone for some reason? But if it's not a town, maybe it's a cover-up for something worse. I thought before zoning out. There was a knock on the door. It startled me out of my daydream. Come in, I yelled. 2 men came inside, both dressed in black suits. Are you the one in charge here? One of them asked. I looked at him and nodded. The guy was wearing a badge on his chest and a gun on his hip. He looked like an FBI agent. I'm about to go and talk to them, and I don't know if they'll believe me. What the fuck do I do? Oh, this is a series? I didn't realize this was a series. Okay. I might save this for next time. I think I'm gonna save this for next time. This update. Or like continuing. Maybe that'll be the theme for next time. Because I didn't realize this was a series. But anyways, let's read the comments. Let's go to the comments. This is weird. Really weird. Towns full of people don't just up and appear, especially not people who have gone missing and have no memory of their former lives. I wonder if they've been brainwashed or something. Either way, trust your instincts. Don't trust the FBI and don't go back there. Keep us updated so we can be sure you're okay. The U.S. military has been known to create fictional towns for the purpose of running drills in. I've seen several posts by people who drove into mysterious towns where the locals seem baffled and angry at their presence, and things you'd expect out of small towns like a McDonald's aren't present. That feels like a Twilight Zone thing, where it's like you're like in a modern day thing. It's like going into like the Bermuda Triangle and then going back into the 50s when you come back. Or like time has either progressed or regressed. That's what this feels like, but I'm not entirely sure. This is what this post reminds me of anyways. But anyways, I think I'm gonna save this update for next time, so stay tuned for that. But anyways, moving on. I found the bunker of a prepper family who went missing 3 years ago. Dr. Daniel Vance was a smart man. Too smart for his own good, maybe. 40 years old, a lecturer in fluid dynamics with a mind made up of shapes and numbers. No one knows why, but one day, on a whim, he crunched the numbers on the apocalypse and came to a troubling conclusion. He didn't share exactly what it was he deduced, but given that he immediately quit his job and liquidated many assets, it's fair to say it wasn't positive. Swept up in the wake of this tremendous upheaval was his wife, a 24-year-old PhD student who had grown infatuated with Daniel some time before. She loved the strange bear of a man who could just as easily build a log cabin as he could explain the idiosyncrasies of an asteroid's orbit. Speaking to Daniel always left you with the profound impression he was right, so when he told her what he wanted to do, she agreed. 15 years and 5 children later, the Vances were living in the distant woods just beyond my hometown. They were enigmatic, richer than the Pope, and extremely serious about their prepper lifestyle. But they were also funny, easygoing, and incredibly compelling to speak to. Larger-than-life survivalists who swept into town with bizarre requests that thrilled local businesses. Vast quantities of cement, iron, lead, and steel were all shipped through the remote mountains so that the Vances could build their shelter. The advanced methods they used to keep it secret were legendary. Daniel had once spent 6 months earning the license necessary to drive HGVs up to his compound so that no one else would lay eyes on it. And on one occasion, when a company had refused his request for GPS tracker-free vehicles, he bought them out wholesale so they had no choice. So when they stopped appearing in town during the pandemic, when requests for food and goods stopped and all contact was dropped, most attributed it to lockdown. They had a bunker and had spent their entire lives training to be self-sufficient in the face of a civilization's collapse. Even Alexander, the youngest at just 3, was already collecting firewood as a chore. Sorry, something in my throat. Let me reread this. Even Alexander, the youngest at just 3, was already collecting firewood as a chore and learning what local plants were edible. Most of us just assumed that if anyone could ride out COVID without breaking a sweat, it would be the Vances. The reality turned out to be something else. When the worst came to light, we discovered that Daniel had used the pandemic as an excuse for a dry run. Family intended to spend 6 months in lockdown and essentially beta test their fallout bunker. 3 months in, and the sheriff received a distress call on the radio. Coordinates were provided by the hushed voice of a sobbing child that most assumed was Alexander, even though that's never been proven. The police arrived and found the bunker still sealed. It took hours for emergency responders to cut into the door. All the while, efforts were made to contact their family within, but to no avail. Once inside, police were left dumbfounded. There was no one to be rescued, no bodies, no survivors. There was evidence the door's locking mechanism had failed and trapped the Vances inside with no way out. But if so, where had they gone? Beds and cots lay everywhere with moldering yellow sheets, buckets close to hand with stains all around them. Some doors were barred, others smashed to pieces. There was even evidence of makeshift quarantines and in places what looked like violence. The police, usually a fantastic source of gossip, were not forthcoming until the town demanded answers, and the sheriff was forced to offer only the barest of outlines. An outbreak of a waterborne illness had struck the Vances down not long after they were locked inside and unable to seek help. Rumors of contagion were overstated, fueled by the unrelated rise of COVID. Whatever contaminant had killed the Vances, it was non-organic in nature. No need to panic. The Vances' loved ones had been notified. The bunker was going to be demolished, and we can all put this terrible tragedy behind us. Of course, we still had questions, 1,000 of them. Why hadn't the family called for help? They had radios, computers, smartphones too. They were survivalists, not Amish. And where were they? What had happened to their bodies? Why hadn't they simply left? We shouted these and more at the town meeting, but the police simply refused to comment. For most of us, the excitement lasted another week or two until we realized we weren't getting answers anytime soon. Besides, the pandemic was in full swing and most of us had other things to worry about. The tragic story eventually faded until it was just one of those awful things in the town's history that we didn't talk about. I was as guilty as anyone else of just forgetting about it. Okay, it's like this next paragraph is interesting because I was gonna bring it up before I saw that this next line that it's like, you found the bunker, but you're telling a story about what happened to them. So there has to be something else. I certainly never expected to find the bunker out there in the woods, faded police tape still on the open door that hung wide open with scorch marks around the lock. It stood out in the woods like someone had cut a hole right in the fabric of reality, the darkness so deep and black it almost ached to look at. The sight of it made my heart drop into my stomach. It radiated pain. Does that make sense? I think some part of my lizard brain picked out details that wouldn't become apparent to me until I got closer, like the bloody finger streaks that stained the handle from where someone had scrabbled furiously at the lock without success. The tiny viewing window had been smashed with a hammer that still lay nearby. I needed only to glimpse it to imagine the family taking turns to stand there and scream into the woods desperate for rescue. Under any other circumstances, I would have run. But I'd gone there looking for my dog, and my light revealed a few wet paw prints making their way down the dusty concrete tunnel. Half Bernese and half collie, Ripley is the sort of dog who trembles in my arms when a storm buffets the windows and needs his paws held when we brush them. I love him. I do not have much of a family or a wife or even many friends, But I have Ripley, and I could no more have turned around and gone home into an empty apartment where I would have to sob my grief away than I could flap my arms and fly. He was my dog, and I raised him since he was a puppy, and I wasn't going to leave him out in those woods. I went in after him. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it wouldn't be good. Whatever the police had found, they not only kept most of the morbid details to themselves, they had also lied. The bunker was not demolished or even sealed off. In fact, looking at the occasional blue latex glove tossed aside and the one or two broken police-issue flashlights, it seemed like the last people inside had been in a hurry to get out. Given this was where 7 people had presumably died, I assumed it was someone's job to clean it all up. But the corridor looked largely untouched. Just a few meters in, and manic writing started to cover the walls. The desperate scrawls of a lone survivor left there to be rediscovered, like cave paintings. Most were deliberations on how to get out, diagrams, blueprints, equations, and formulae. And all focused on the door and the circuits responsible for its faulty lock. I instinctively assumed they belonged to Daniel and that he'd been the last to die. What a god-awful fate for a man to outlive his children. Yet it got worse. Slowly, the writing changed from equations and plans to a desperate scrawl. The same few phrases repeated over and over. 5 doors, 5, not 6, 6. Didn't make it, 6 doors, 6. It seemed like the kind of thing you'd find in an asylum. A psychotic rambling punctuated only by 6 paragraphs right at the end. Each letter was impeccably neat, and each small paragraph was topped with a beautifully drawn Christian cross. Elliot Vance, aged 15, a gifted guitarist. He liked boys even though he thought I did not know. I loved him with everything I had. He would have made a great man. Alicia Vance, aged 14. She liked to paint and to shoot. He had her mother's mean streak. It would have served her well in the future. Elijah Vance, aged 8. The smartest of us all. These were Daniel's memorials to his family, and seeing the words lit up by my torch was a haunting insight into the overwhelming despair he'd endured. He must have realized he wouldn't get the chance to speak at his family's funerals or to write their obituaries. This was his last desperate way of making sure the world might one day know them as he did, as real people. The words marked the end of the tunnel, standing adjacent to a trap door in the ground. It was not open, but the tunnel came to a dead end immediately afterwards, and Ripley's prints disappeared at the hatch. I feared he might be in danger, but still I stopped and looked at the bunker door 20 meters behind me. The once gloomy forest looked so bright, even on this cloudy day, the air dotted with rain. Part of me felt like I was leaving the whole world behind as I began to climb down the ladder. I entered a large circular living space that was packed with furniture and little nooks and crannies. The walls were covered with folding beds and tables, and every inch was multifunctional. A dining space could become a sitting space, which in turn might be where someone slept or even exercised. It all depended on what particular bit of furniture you unfolded or unclipped or unfurled. 7 people in close quarters, nowhere near enough privacy. It made sense they went with this cluttered, overlapping use of space, but it was still a large room, bigger than most studio apartments, and there were a few corridors that led deeper into the earth, telling me the bunker had unseen depths. Okay, quick question. How the hell did a dog get all the way down this ladder? Did it fall down? Did it break its legs or something? What happened? I looked for some sign of my dog and soon found his trail, but this far from the raining cops, Ripley's prints were starting to fade. After barely a few meters, they petered out vaguely in the direction of a nearby door. I wanted to follow, but stopped myself from rushing onwards. It was unlikely Ripley was getting out any other way, and I'd do us no good getting hurt myself. I decided to take a look around and quickly spotted a dinner table. If I needed proof the police had not bothered with a cleanup, this was it. The plates were still out, the food rotten to a strange blackened husk. A child's hat lay across one place setting, the once creamy fleece turned a sickly green and yellow. The chairs had their backs reinforced with wooden beams fitted with long grooves, so that something the width of a nail could slide into them. and on each of the cushions were foul-smelling stains that looked oddly like an ass print. I touched one with gloved hands, and the material cracked audibly. Ew. Whatever it was, similar stains were on the cutlery and plates, and there were even handprints of it placed firmly on the tablecloth. At first, I thought it was blood. That wasn't quite right. It was too contained to be from leaking blood. On the back of one of the chairs, a stain tapered exactly where a woman's waist would be, like a near-perfect silhouette. I shivered as I remembered that Miranda Vance had always been a slim woman and wondered how she had left her imprint on the gray fabric. Using my torch, I saw these stains repeated in the oddest of places. Yes, there were some on beds and blankets and even patches on plain floor, exactly like you might expect in a room full of sick people. But why did one stain on the floor bear such a strong resemblance to a child huddled in the fetal position? And why was the same stuff all over the TV remote and on books on shelves and board games too? Everything from sofa cushions to DVD boxes to piles of dirty laundry were covered in the same dried brownish material that gave off a foul coppery miasma. I found the jigsaw particularly baffling. Someone had set up another table with 4 chairs, all modified with the same back support as those by the dinner table, and a jigsaw had been laid out with 4 separate piles, but only one was depleted. The rest looked largely untouched, almost like someone had portioned out pieces for 3 other people who had absolutely no interest in going along with it. Maybe Daniel had tried to keep up morale while the family was sick? God help me. If that were true, I couldn't help but imagine the poor man sat there with his loved ones close to death, desperately trying to encourage them to click their own pieces into place while they faded in and out of consciousness. Something about that room emanated madness, and the longer I stayed down there, flicking the bright disc of light of my torch from one detail to another, the more I wanted to leave. One door had wooden beams nailed across it. One sofa had been partially disassembled. Multiple beds had been burned, and all the light bulbs had been removed and put in a box on the kitchen countertop. Looking up at the ceiling, I finally had some insight into why the police were so confident that the Vances had not survived despite never finding their bodies. Someone had jammed a human finger into one of the empty sockets, almost like they had expected to glow with the flick of a switch. What was it about this place that had caused the police to leave and never return? Not to even take that finger and test it for signs of illness, or even just to confirm who it belonged to. I decided it was time to hurry up and find my dog. People had died in that place, and while I'm not superstitious, I can't be the only skeptic who has done the calculations in his head and realized it costs nothing to be respectful of ghosts. That bunker was cramped, terrifying, and the air stank so bad, I started to worry I'd get sick myself. It served no one any good to linger, but I'd be damned if I'd just walk away and leave Ripley to rot down there. It's not like he could climb a ladder and get out on his own, even if I wasn't entirely sure how he'd gotten down here in the first place. Summoning what little bravery I had left, I called out and broke the silence, something which left a terrible taboo in that god-awful place, like screaming in a graveyard. "Ripley!" I waited and hoped I'd hear the pitter-patter of his paws, but for the longest moments, there was only the kind of silence that makes you wonder if someone or something in the darkness is holding its breath, trying to look like another patch of nothing, biding its time until you finally turn around and show it your back. The TV came on with a blurt of white noise that was so loud and so sudden I cried, threw my arms up, and nearly fell backwards onto a rolled-out sleeping bag that looked like it had spent a week in the sewer. By the time I realized what had caused the noise, I could hear a tiny rendition of Daniel Vance's voice. "I realize the issue here. I need to emphasize just how little I understand anything that's..." I frowned at the screen as I approached. It showed a greenish infrared view of the bunker with Daniel up front and the dinner table behind him. It was grainy and hard to see, but I could clearly tell that his family was sitting in those chairs. "Miranda was first to fall ill. Looking back, it makes perfect sense. Miranda often went into stores to fetch food for cooking, and we found it behind one of the refrigerators. So that's... shit." One of the figures in the background slumped onto the table with a loud clank and sent a plate spinning off onto the ground. Shit, 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 Daniel muttered as he got up and grabbed the woman by the shoulders and set her upright. Miranda never did like my cooking. He snorted a laugh as he fussed with something at the back of the chair. The rides are much better than tape. All those hours spent taping them up right to the chairs. Never worked, but the rides, they fit right into the spine. With a little modification, I can just slot them into the chairs. That way, everybody's able to join in for dinner. I'm working on something similar for family game night. Daniel wandered over to the camera and with a grin, he lifted it from the tripod and scanned the dinner table. What I saw nearly made me drop my torch. His family were long dead, gaunt faces, missing noses, lips that had receded to reveal awful grins. These were corpses, plain as day. Even when viewed through such a low-resolution image, the only thing that made them remotely alive was the way their eyes still reflected the infrared back so that they glowed in the dark. And yet Daniel seemed oblivious to it all. He tousled Elliot's hair, kissed his wife on the cheek, run a hand across one young girl's shoulders. He even picked the young Alexander up from his high chair, and I assumed he coddled him. I don't know for sure because I looked away, unwilling to see the poor boy up close. Eyes averted from the screen, I couldn't help but pan my torch across to that same dinner table and shiver as I finally realized what all those stains were. Not quite blood, but close. Liquefying flesh. Ill. Left alone for months. Daniel had not put his family's bodies to rest. Instead, he had moved them around from place to place and puppeted them, living life as if nothing had really changed. Looking at where those stains had settled, I saw a clear pattern emerge. He had put them to bed. He had set them dinner. He had propped them up to watch TV or gave them their favorite books. He even sat there as lifeless husks while Daniel waited for them to complete a fucking jigsaw. The idea horrified me to my core. Back to work. It's obviously not part of the original designs. No room on the other side, not on the blueprints. Elliot didn't believe me, and why wouldn't he? I made every inch of this place, but I did not install that door and storage on the bottom level. I checked the cameras, and some of the photos I took during the build, and the wall was just blank. But the door is there now, and it must lead somewhere. I don't know when or why it opens, but it does. And the next time I'll be ready, because I have to know what's on the other side, and why it did this to us, alone down here, often all asleep at once. Anything could have slit our throats and been done with it, but it didn't. It took its time, and I have to know why. It took our radios and computers and phones. One by one, none of us noticing until it was far too late. I kept telling the kids they needed to take better care of their things, and even as they complained, I just assumed the phones were lying behind some shelf. Where else could they be? Where else could they go in a locked bunker? But it wasn't the children at all. Looking back, there were so many signs. Who kept taking away the lights? Who kept draining the batteries in our torches? How long did we live with it before we realized we weren't alone? Was it here every step of the way? A door out of nothing that leads to nowhere, at least most of the time, because I know for a fact it does not always open onto a blank wall. There is something behind it. I can hear it shuffling around in there, wet breath rattling in its lungs, a horrible sound I hear roaming these halls when it thinks I'm asleep. I listened to Daniel, fascinated by this strangely compelling rant, when movement caught my eye, an infrared camera running in the dark, its image a whirling mess of uniform noise. Or was it I'd seen? I paused the tape and rewound, squinting. I saw two pinpricks of light in the darkness just over Daniel's shoulder. Slowly, the image resolved in my eyes. I knew what I was seeing, and it turned my blood to ice. Miranda Vance had turned her head, and her lifeless eyes glowed as she fixed them on the back of Daniel's head. Not even any point in leaving at this stage. I'm no doctor, but that door is giving off enough radiation to, well, to kill a family of 7. If none of us had touched it, being in the same room is risky, but not lethal. But given how sick we become, it's pretty obvious our curiosity got the better of us, one by one, and we all got too close. Or maybe not. Maybe that thing on the other side came through and did this. I don't even know. Wait, what was that? Daniel turned and the camera stopped recording. The image it froze on was of a lone man, bright as a star in the camera's lens, facing off against unknowable darkness broken up by 6 pairs of white glowing eyes. It's you. I became painfully aware of my position relative to the table when I had the painful premonition that if I turned, those chairs would not be empty. I would see the Vances, all of them, Daniel as well, waiting for me. God, this is creepy. Heads turned, a body left to rot for years in the dark. Behind me, something shifted. It breathed, loud, quick. I knew what it was. I knew. It came at me so fast that when I felt something hot and wet touch my hand, I screamed, only for the presence to suddenly recoil. But then, without hesitation, it leapt at me and bore me to the ground. I wept as Ripley licked my face. He was shivering and, worst of all, silent, which was not normal. He was not a quiet dog, not when greeting me, and not when excited like he was now. Whatever he seen down here, he clung to me and dug his paws into my shoulders like he wanted to be cradled over the shoulder, something he has been too big to do for years. Oh, you fucking idiot, I cooed in a soft whisper, and even in the dark I could feel his tail wagging, looking aside. I felt nothing but relief at finding him. Let's get the hell out of here. I picked him up, straining a little under the weight, but refusing to give in to tired muscles, and made for the ladder. It wasn't easy climbing the 3 or 4 rungs to the hatch, but I managed it and gave the hatch a shove. First one hand, then 2, and again, with everything I had, but still that hatch refused to budge. Shit, I cried, while pounding at it with my fist. All I achieved was a sore wrist. The hatch had jammed when somehow the handle had been snapped clean off. Now I'd need a pair of pliers or something to cut through the metal bar locking it shut. My fingers couldn't move it, nor could I brute force the hatch open. The metal bar was an inch thick. At the very least, I'd need some tools to get it from this side. At least it's fixable. Or at least it's fixable, I thought, as I climbed back down and caught my breath. On one wall, I noticed a simple diagram of the bunker made in chalk. It had 3 floors. The bottom was storage. Daniel had mentioned that before. And I noticed that he had drawn it with a large red X, and the top floor was labeled quarters, where I stood now. But the middle floor was labeled workshops, and it was there I realized that I'd find what I needed. How long is this story? I didn't realize the story was this long. Okay. I didn't realize this story was so long. I apologize. There was one door that had opened onto a concrete stairwell. Standing at the top, I shone my light down the spiraling guard rails, unsure of what it was I hoped to see. There were only harsh shadows, and the sense of something foul rising up on the air, a smell that tickled my throat and burned a little in my lungs. Had the police even gone down this far? Had they seen what I'd seen on that TV and just left? Somehow I thought it was unlikely that had been enough to send the entire sheriff's department running. So was it something that had done it? Something that had been enough to terrify dozens of armed men? Something that was almost definitely down there? The door. I went down quietly. At first I considered leaving Ripley behind, but after losing him the first time, I decided I'd rather risk it just to know he was right next to me. Besides, he was being quieter than I was, and I didn't feel much like going down those stairs on my own. He accompanied me with only the quiet click-clack of his paws on concrete, a sound I found deeply comforting as I barely managed to keep my torch from shaking in my hand and my breathing steady. Down one floor, I found the workshop exactly as you might expect. A large space filled with generators and fuel and water and water tanks and boilers and heaters and pretty much anything and everything that you need to survive, but which you couldn't put outside due to fallout. Wires, pipes, and tubes ran from one end to the other, one end of the room to the other, and even years later, most of the machinery still hummed in the pitch-black emptiness. An idea I found deeply unsettling. Taking one look at that strange tangle of heart shapes and industrial figures looming out of the walls and floor, I shivered and looked around, quickly finding a small area Daniel had cordoned off for his own use. About a fifth of the total floor space, there was a large workbench and some seriously high-end machining equipment, all very well used: lathes, buzzsaws, drills, belt sanders, welding torches, everything a man needed to do it himself. Daniel had been busy. I'm not exactly what it was he'd been working, but there was an arm on the bench. It sat atop a pile of papers that had slowly turned brown over the years, until the whole thing looked like it had been soaked in tobacco spit. On the whiteboard was a faded but still visible diagram of what looked like a ball and socket joint. I thought of the tape of Daniel's little mechanism to keep his family upright, and then looked at the arm and suppressed a momentary gag reflex. I don't know if Dan had been working on posable limbs, or just a way to put the decomposing remains back together after they started to fall apart, but the size of the arm suggested a preteen child, and he left it out on the surface like there was a disassembled clock. It was also missing a finger. So how fucking crazy was he? I wondered as I pinched my nose with one hand and began overturning boxes, looking for a hefty pair of pliers or maybe a hacksaw. Ripley backed away from the noise, but once I made sure he wasn't going anywhere, I carried on grabbing and pulling at box after box, hoping I'd find what I was looking for. Anything to break that fucking metal bar. In the end, I managed to get a pair of bolt cutters, a crowbar, and a heavy-duty pair of pliers. One went in my pocket, one went down the back of my jeans, and the other was clutched in my fist, too large to be tucked away in my clothes. The bolt cutters felt hefty in my hand, which was a bit of a comfort, but that feeling didn't last long. Something moved in the darkness, out there in the twisted jungle of shadows cast by all those pipes and wires that ran from one machine to the next. A figure moved, thin but unmistakably human in its outline. I couldn't help but remember what I'd seen on that tape. Surely it couldn't have been real. Maybe Daniel had rigged something up. Some fishing wire and a motor maybe. The idea that those bodies had been moving on their own, I couldn't be sure of that, could I? It was a frightening idea, one my mind had latched onto out of sheer panic. That was all. Then I saw them, a pair of white pinpricks reflecting back at me from the depths of that cluttered room. Ripley, already behind me, head nuzzled into my leg, pushed even closer against me and let out a barely audible whine under his breath. The behavior of a dog who was terrified, close to pissing himself with fear. Just a bit of metal. Just a bit of metal, I told myself as the light shook so violently in my hand, I struggled to see straight. 2 shiny bits of metal. They blinked and began to come towards me. If I had any doubts left, they were dispersed by the sight of a pale white hand emerging into the light. I ran straight into the stairs and went to climb them, but only 1 or 2 steps in, I saw something gripping the handrail on the top floor. A moldy clump of flesh, only just recognizable as a fist. The flesh withered until the fingers were basically bone. Without meaning to, I brought my light out of habit, and I saw the bloated face of a hairless corpse glaring down at me. I couldn't even tell you if it had been a teenage girl or the 6-year-old Daniel. Either way, I instinctively turned and found another body shambling towards me out of the workshop. I was trapped. Nowhere to go. By the feel of warm fluid on the back of my leg, I could tell Ripley had finally pissed himself. An adult dog, tail between his legs, shivering like a puppy and desperate to be picked up. God, I needed him to just stay together for a little longer. I couldn't take him in my arms, but I couldn't leave him behind either. With nowhere to go, I ran down and entered storage. There was a temptation to stop once I hit the bottom. Down here, the air was thicker and the sounds of the breathing were muted, somehow distant, but I only had to look back up to see 3 pairs of eyes glaring down at me, so without giving it any much further thought, I barreled down the corridor and stumbled onto a door at random. Opening it, I saw what looked like your standard storage room, only most of the shelves had been overturned and the food left to rot on the floor. 1 or 2 shelving units were still upright though, and their shelves were covered in tall, opaque boxes that made them a fantastic hiding spot. That, I decided, would have to be where I crouched down and turned off my light. I was already inside when I realized that wasn't all that was in there. How much is there? There's so much more. Oh my god. Hold on. Where? Okay, I left off here. I was already inside when I realized that wasn't all that was in here. The door almost looked normal. I could see why Daniel must have been confused by it, because it looked a little bit like all the other doors down here, but it was different too. It was too tall and too wide and about 1.5 feet off the ground, and the metal rusted in its entirety like it had aged out of sync with everything else down here. All around the jam was a profusion of wet, soppy moss, like the kind you find hanging off trees in a swamp, and every few seconds the door would leak something strange and oily, like the kind of thing you find in a parking lot on a rainy day. Of course, that wasn't too strange in itself, but the leak was horizontal, defying gravity, so that every few seconds a large glop of the stuff would whip across the room and slap into the wall opposite, creating a puddle around the size of a man that defied all reason. Remembering Daniel's words about radiation, I instinctively inched away from this puddle and the door on the opposite wall, backing myself in the darkest, quietest corner I could while I pulled Ripley behind me and hoped to hell he wouldn't give me away. Once I was in there, I turned off my light and waited. I must have taken longer than I thought to hide in the spot, because it was barely 2 seconds later when a few figures entered the room. It was pitch black after I turned off my torch, but they made enough noise to let me know that at least 2 of them had stumbled in after me. I stayed there, unable to see anything, not sure if they were headed straight for me or just getting ready to leave. Forced to hold out and let luck decide my fate. When I finally heard something scrape against the wall barely 2 feet from where I stood, I gave up and switched my light on, desperate to know what was coming for me. The sound had been terribly misleading. Oh God. Daniel Vance was no more than 6 inches from my face. "Get out!" he hissed from a toothless and cracked mouth. A living corpse just like the others. Somehow a flash of intelligence remained in those wide, terrified eyes. And then I heard it, the creaking of a door, and without even thinking, I turned the light and saw it on the wall. I saw it open, and behind the strange steel there was more than just plain old concrete, much more. I saw a raging gullet of flesh, a ringed tube of pulsing muscle, lined with teeth the size of hands, a spiraling descent into madness. Hot, fetid air washed into the room, buffeting me and the rotting corpses, all of us paralyzed by what we were seeing. Even if, for most of the figures besides Daniel and myself, they didn't have eyes to see with. "What the fuck?" I muttered, unable to take my eyes from the flesh tube beyond that doorway. "It's coming," Daniel whispered as he grabbed me with one fist and hurled me out of the room. I hit the floor and skidded along, a slick fluid left by the Vance's footprints, the smell of which turned my stomach. Perhaps the worst detail was that it was cold. I don't know why, I just expected whatever oozed them to be feverishly hot, but it wasn't. It soaked my shirt like I had fallen into a muddy puddle. "It's coming." This voice wasn't Daniel's. I couldn't say for sure, but it sounded like a child's whisper. One by one, the bodies shuffled over to the open door and knelt before it. I don't know why, but I got the impression the others had lost pretty much everything left of their minds, but Daniel remained aware. He looked back at me once more and spoke before he pressed his head to the floor in supplication with the others. "The only thing we did wrong was being here for it to torture. It didn't need a reason, just an opportunity. Leave. It won't let us go. It won't let us die. If it catches you, it won't let you go either." His forehead kissed the dirt, and then something reached through the door and gripped his head in its palm, the way you or I might pick up an apple. In full panic, I ran over and grabbed my dog and the bolt cutters, and I ran like my legs were pistons whose signals of exhaustion and fatigue could not slow me down or cause me to fail. I had to move. I had to leave. The hand that had grabbed Daniel, the sight of it flushed my mind clean like some kind of enema. It hurt to see the image replay in my mind, but there was nothing else in my head echoing around except the sight of fingers with too many knuckles, and nails as large as a smartphone. I reached the top floor and nearly collapsed from breathlessness, and I wouldn't let myself stay down for long. I crawled over to the ladder and crawled up and immediately went to work to cut the metal lock. It was hell with just one hand, the other clinging to the torch that I kept frantically pointing at the door behind me. It wasn't long before I fumbled one too many times and dropped my only source of light. No, I mewed, but there was no time to look for it. I had to get out, and I had to get out fast. I couldn't see, but I wasn't sure I could hear something climbing up those stairs. Not the steady thump of human feet. No, this was different. This was a rapid pitter-patter of a spider, maybe. Something with hundreds of feet or hands, or God knows what, skittering along the floor and walls and ceiling, pulling itself along with a body whose mere shape would offend God. Using all my strength, I leaned hard on the bolt cutters, and at last the bolt gave. I threw the hatch open and got just enough ambient light to see Ripley hovering at the bottom of the ladder, growling infectiously at the door. I crouched down, scooped him up, and fled up the ladder so quickly that my muscles turned to jelly at the top, and I fell over onto hands and knees, but still I was out. The long corridor covered in writing was ahead of me, and at the very end a doorway capped now by the tired blue light of the full moon. Ripley needed no encouragement. He whipped down the corridor with canine speed, and I followed at a broken and stumbling crawl, eventually shouldering past the open door and collapsing onto the fourth floor. For a few seconds, I drifted in and out of consciousness, but when I looked up and saw the canopy overhead moving, the branches backlit by a full moon, I snapped awake and glared down at something grabbing my ankle. The hand had reached out of the dark and seized me, and was slowly dragging me back into the earth below. Whatever it was, most of its body looked out of sight and in the shadows behind the doorway, but the hand that crushed my leg was the size of my torso, with an arm that looked like it belonged to a mole rat. I struck it with my own fist. I dug my nails in. I cried and kicked and screamed, but nothing could stop it. From behind the doors, something like a face grinned and leered at me with joy. It was taking its time, sure enough, pulling me in so slowly that it gave my mind all the time in the world to appreciate the nightmare that awaited me. I think if, in that moment, you'd given me a gun, I would have shot myself, because God help me, I couldn't escape the look in Daniel's eyes, how he'd knelt to worship this thing, like a man who'd know that hope or pride or joy, or anything with even a hint of goodness to it, was so far out of reach for him, it might as well be a dream. How long was this thing going to keep them down there? How long did it intend to keep me? I wept like a child, feeling like my mind was slowly cracking as I tried everything to stop that fucking thing pulling me into the shadows. I kicked at the earth. I dug into it, using my hands, looking for a root or a pipe or anything to hold on to. Nothing. Nothing I did would slow it down. I was no more than a foot from the doorway when Ripley reappeared. A dog, afraid of hoovers and plastic bags and doors that move on their own. A dog who once got stared down by a particularly feisty rabbit who stopped mid-chase and turned around, baffling the predator on his tails. A dog you couldn't even watch scary movies around. And he lunged at that arm like he was a wolf, like he'd always been one. And while he didn't quite break the skin, the pressure was enough to make the thing's grip weaken, and I slid my leg out. Unable to stand, I knelt and grabbed the dog and pulled as hard as I could. Now that fucking thing bled at last, as the pressure of the jaws and the sliding teeth ripped into its flesh. Together at last, Ripley and I were let go and sent rolling backwards, head over heels. I wasted no time waiting or looking or processing. I heaved the dog to my chest and crawled until I passed out, making it maybe a half a kilometer away. Only when I could no longer see the door did I let myself fall to the ground face first and gave up consciousness. The doctor said I had pneumonia, which I suppose made some kind of sense. I might have believed them were it not for the sheriff's visit, asking strange questions of me as I lay in bed about what I may or may not have seen. I dismissed them to the best of my ability. I wasn't interested in chasing that particular nightmare down, figuring out if it had been real or not. At least not while I lay there half drowning in my own infection. To be fair, I had at least some sympathy for why the police had done so little to seal that place off. I have, on occasion, thought about going and doing the job myself, but to this day I still have nightmares about being pulled into the dark beyond that door. Not just the bunker door, the one I narrowly avoided at the end, but the one below. What I saw was a kind of madness, I'm sure of it, and I often think of Daniel's words. It didn't need a reason, just an opportunity. Somehow the Vantas were that opportunity. Maybe they built their bunker on a ley line or a weak spot between dimensions, or the site of former satanic rituals. I'm not sure it even matters. They went into the dark thinking it'd be a safe place to wait out the world's troubles, but something had been down there waiting for them, waiting for a chance to get out a family of 7 people, to lock them in, deprive them of escape, and slowly take from them everything it could. I've moved since then, couldn't help it. It wasn't just the memories, you see, it was the shortwave radio I kept in my basement. Something my father passed on to me when I was just a boy. God, I'd forgotten about it, at least until I woke up one day to the sound of it blaring white noise down in the dark. And buried in that sound was the faint whispering of a man, his voice barely recognizable, but unmistakably his. Let them go, let them go, let them go, let them go. God, that's creepy. That's the creepiest one so far. That and the doorbell one. It's like, because it's unexplainable. It's like, what could possibly be causing these things? God, creepy. Okay, comment time. Damn, lucky you and Ripley got out, but I just have so many questions about the poor Vances. Same. My only question is about how many liters of gasoline would you need to truck out of there to burn the entire unholy nightmare out of that hole and back to whatever tormented place it withdraws into. That is a fair point. This was terrifying to read. Move to the other end of the world and never go back. Yeah. And here I was fearing that your dog would have to make a heroic sacrifice just so you could get out. Yeah, I was thinking that too. It's like, oh, poor Ripley. But no, they both made it out alive. Good.